Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we're diving into the much-anticipated third season of From, the show that bends our minds and leaves us with dozens of new questions with every finale. This video will break down, step by step, all the mind-bending events that befell our characters and the town, picking up right where Season 2 left off. So, if you're ready, sit back and let's witness together what happened in the next chapter of this nightmare. Our season begins at that exact, shocking moment where Season 2 concluded. Tabitha opens her eyes to the sterile whiteness of a hospital room. As much as she wants to believe it was all a dream, the coldness of the IV in her veins, the calm voice of the nurse, and the normal flow of the outside world seem to prove that she has truly escaped from that horrifying, decaying town. However, this sense of relief is shattered in seconds by an overwhelming panic. Her mind and heart are with the family she left behind. Just then, when the nurse mentions that the police have arrived to take a statement, any sense of trust Tabitha had crumbles. She knew no one would believe her, that they would see her as a madwoman. Acting quickly, she changes into clothes she finds, disguising herself, and manages to slip out of the hospital unnoticed. As she walks desperately through the normal sounds and people of the outside world, she freezes at the sight of a silhouette across the street. The boy in white was standing there, looking at her with those familiar sad eyes. She ran after him, blending into the crowd, but lost him down an alley. She was now certain that the nightmare had leaked into this world with her. As her panic grew, she asked a passerby for their phone. She called her mother, and with a trembling voice could only manage to say, "I'm okay. I don't know if you all are, but I'm okay," before hanging up, ignoring her mother's pleas. What she thought was salvation was, in fact, just a different stage of the nightmare. Meanwhile, back in the town, the horror of the night had given way to the heavy despair of the day. Boyd had managed to awaken the townspeople from their dreamlike nightmare after smashing the music box, but this victory came at a great cost. Jade was on the verge of losing his mind, haunted by the secret of the symbol he saw in the tunnels and the whispers of the dead children, constantly sketching the same symbol on paper. The town itself seemed to be dying along with them. The sky was a perpetual leaden gray that never brightened. The earth exuded a smell of rot instead of fertility. Crops yellowed before they could grow, and the animals were dying one by one from inexplicable illnesses. The town's hope was flickering like the last candlelight about to be extinguished. Tabitha's absence had shattered the Matthews family. Jim could think of nothing else but going after his wife. His sole objective was to find the faraway tree that Tabitha had passed through. Although he was determined to embark on this dangerous quest alone, Kenny insisted on joining him, both to protect Jim and to bring some hope back to the town. Boyd, thinking this journey was madness, couldn't stop them, and instead gave them directions based on his own experiences. Follow the spider webs. They'll be a sign that you're on the right path. However, as they searched for the webs in the eerie depths of the forest, they lost their way and found themselves in a place they had never seen before, cloaked in an unsettling silence. Here, there were small cabins made of old logs and strange humanoid figures made from tree branches. The most shocking discovery, however, was the fields behind the cabins. Unlike the rot that poisoned everything in town, healthy green vegetables were growing here. This unexpected discovery offered a miraculous solution to the town's famine, turning Jim and Kenny's personal mission into a vital supply run for the entire community. Meanwhile, the tension at Colony House was at an all-time high. Donna's shaken authority and dwindling resources fueled the desire of characters like Randall to form their own small groups and set their own rules. But the real threat was born from a miracle, a place no one expected: Fatima's pregnancy. Initially seen as a ray of hope in the gloomy town, this event turned into an element of horror with Fatima's strange behavior. Cravings for rotten food and soil, whispering in unknown tongues at night, and her belly growing much faster than a normal pregnancy, made Ellis watch in horror as the love of his life transformed, both physically and spiritually, into something unrecognizable. After escaping the hospital, Tabitha found Victor's father, Henry, at the address from the lunchbox. Henry was a man living in grief, having lost his wife Miranda and their children, Victor and Eloise, to that cursed town years ago. They both shared the same goal: to find a way back to the town. During their conversation, Henry mentioned a mysterious bottle tree that his wife Miranda constantly talked about in her visions related to the town. Believing this tree could be a gateway, the two decided that their only hope of returning was to find it. However, a car accident on the way led them to find themselves in an ambulance. When they regained consciousness, they were faced with their greatest fear. The ambulance driver said he saw the infamous fallen tree blocking the road. Tabitha's pleas turned into desperate screams. She wanted to return to her family, but not like this, not this way. "Stop!" she cried out. "The sun is setting. We can't get there now. Please try to understand. You can't spend the night outside." But the paramedics interpreted her frantic state as a hysterical fit due to severe trauma. They tried to calm her, but Tabitha's deadly warnings were ignored. The ambulance turned back on that ominous road, and as it passed by the same tree again, the engine sound muffled, the radio filled with static, and the familiar colors of the outside world shifted into the town's gloomy, leaden atmosphere. They were no longer in their own world. They were back in town. That night, the townspeople were startled by the sound of sirens. The lights of the ambulance appearing on the horizon were both a beacon of hope and a harbinger of disaster. When Boyd and the others rushed out, they saw the ambulance silently surrounded by the creatures. Inside, Tabitha and Henry were trapped. One of the creatures, who seemed to be a leader, walked towards Boyd and offered a deal: the keys to the ambulance in exchange for one of them. And the person he wanted was clear: Randall, who was constantly causing trouble and had become a burden to everyone. Boyd was faced with the most horrific choice of his life. On one side, there was Tabitha, who could bring answers, Victor's father, and innocent people. On the other, Randall, a man despised by the town, but still a human being. In that hellish silence that lasted only seconds, Boyd made his decision. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a poisoned hand reaching for Boyd's soul. Boyd took one last look at Randall's pleading, terrified eyes, then snatched the keys from the creature's cold hand, swearing under his breath, and ran to the ambulance without looking back. He had left him to his fate. As Randall's agonizing screams echoed in the darkness of the night, Boyd and the others managed to rescue Tabitha and Henry. But the price of this rescue was a wound that would never heal in Boyd's soul and in the conscience of the entire town. The most shocking event of the season began when Elgin, driven by visions, kidnapped Fatima to protect the baby he believed to be the savior. Elgin imprisoned Fatima in a secret underground bunker outside the town. When Boyd and Ellis realized Fatima was missing, they went frantic, and soon all signs pointed to the strangely behaving Elgin. When they caught Elgin and tied him up in a room at Colony House, Boyd experienced one of the darkest moments of his life. Influenced by his visions, Elgin refused to speak, only whispering nonsensical things. Boyd's patience had run out. He was ready to do anything to find Fatima, and, in a blind rage, was about to torture Elgin with the tools he had grabbed. At that very moment, Donna and the police officer, Donnie Acosta, who had arrived with the ambulance, burst into the room. "Boyd, what are you doing?" yelled Donna, stopping him. A heated argument broke out among the three downstairs. As Donna and Donnie argued that Boyd was losing his mind and that this was not the way, a shadow, taking advantage of the commotion upstairs, silently slipped into Elgin's room. It was Sarah. A few seconds later, a blood-curdling scream from upstairs cut through the argument like a knife. When Boyd, Donna, and Danny rushed up, they were met with a horrific sight. One of Elgin's eyes had been gouged out, and Sarah was standing over him with a bloody tool in her hand. Sarah turned to them with cold composure and whispered, "He's in the underground bunker." When Boyd and Ellis found the described underground bunker, they were met with a horrific sight. The woman in the kimono was gone, and Fatima was lying on the floor in shock, covered in blood. "She took it," Fatima whispered, pointing with a trembling finger at an open hatch on the floor. "She went down." Boyd froze in horror for a moment, then turned to Ellis and ordered him to take Fatima and return to the town immediately, and without hesitation, he plunged alone into the darkness behind the hatch. When he descended, he found himself in a massive cave where all the creatures had gathered for a ritual. The creatures were gathered around a piece of flesh that the woman in the kimono had placed on an altar. Before his eyes, that mass of flesh grew at an incredible rate, changed shape, and finally transformed into a reborn bloody Smiley, the grinning creature. Boyd was witnessing the rebirth of the nightmare he had killed in the second season. As Jade, Jim, and Tabitha had taken Victor's violin and gone to the bottle tree, Jade had figured out the correct sequence of notes and began to play the forgotten, mournful lullaby on the violin. As the melody echoed eerily through the dead forest, the ghosts of the dead children appeared one by one from among the trees. Dozens of children floated silently towards them, their eyes holding neither anger nor hatred, only an age-old weariness. The children stopped in front of Tabitha, knelt down together, and whispered as if they were a single entity. "Anqui, remember." In that moment, everything fell into place. It wasn't a whisper. It was the sound of a key turning in a lock. A dam broke in Tabitha's mind, and the terrible truth was laid bare. Hundreds of years ago, the people who lived on this land were deceived by a dark entity with the promise of immortality. The price was to sacrifice their most precious possessions, their own children. The creatures that came out at night were the parents who had accepted that horrific deal. However, the first couple who carried the souls of Tabitha and Jade at that time had refused this monstrosity and tried to save their children, but failed. Now they understood. Their destiny was to return to this town again and again, to be reincarnated in different bodies, and to be trapped in this cycle until they could atone for that first failure, until they could save all the sacrificed children. This town was a prison, but it was also a broken record, constantly playing the same painful song. As Tabitha crumbled under the weight of this age-old grief, Jim saw the unearthly expression on his wife's face and took a step towards her. Tabitha turned her eyes to Jim, but it was as if she was looking not at him, but through the centuries that passed through her. I need some time." And she slowly turned and began to walk into the forest. Jim, at a loss for what to do, watched his wife for a moment, then turned to walk towards where his children were, when he saw someone emerge from the trees. It was his daughter, Julie, but something was wrong. Her clothes were different, her hair was different. This wasn't the Julie who had left his side just a few hours ago. It was as if she had been torn from a future time or another reality. An unnatural silence fell, and from the darkest part of the trees, a man in a yellow suit appeared. This was the same cold voice Jim had heard on the radio, the one that told him not to let Tabitha dig in the basement. The man approached them calmly, focused on Jim, and said, "There is a price for knowledge. I told you she shouldn't have dug that hole." This was not a threat. It was the declaration of a rule. Before Jim could even ask, "Who are you?" the man in the yellow suit lunged at him with incredible supernatural speed. This wasn't a struggle. It was a predator tearing apart its prey. Amidst Jade's horrified, frozen gaze, Julie's agonized scream of "No!" was heard from another part of the forest. That scream was proof that the cycle had claimed its next victim and that the nightmare would never end. The season ends with the most brutal, abrupt, and hopeless conclusion yet. Thank you all for joining me in reviewing this incredible season. What do you think about this fictional third season of From? Which moment affected you the most? Don't forget to share your own theories and expectations for the fourth season in the comments. If you liked the video, you can support me by subscribing to my channel. See you in the next video. Take care.